如果你以為呢個淨係改文獻咧，就錯啦。因為點解咧？因為而家出嚟驚嗰班咧，其中一批係一班內科醫生。內科醫生直情佢走出嚟講咧，佢冇辦法一致去認同咗一樣嘢，就係幾時突然間改變咗。有啲人話好似記憶當中係有個好似如夢似真嘅記憶，好似90年代改咗；有啲係好似2000年代，有啲好似2010年嘅時候改咗。但係總之咧，其中一樣一致嘅係咩咧？邊個想知啊？就係全個人類歷史當中，人類嘅骨架同器官係變咗啦。我哋嘅腎已經唔喺腰個位啦，我哋嘅腎而家喺胸腔位啦。我哋嘅心已經唔係偏左啦，我哋嘅心偏喺中間啦。我哋而家所擁有嘅骨骼，全部骨骼咧都變晒啦。人類再唔係188塊骨骼啦，人類係200幾塊骨骼啦。人類而家眼球後邊不嬲係冇一塊骨喺度嘅，所有內科醫生都知道，因為你以前聽過好多嘅意外咧，插咗隻眼就直接插入後腦噶嘛。但係而家咧唔係。而家後邊有塊骨喺度，我哋嘅人嘅頭骨係變咗，我哋個松果體啊，就我哋弟兄姊妹就一定知道松果體喺邊個位咧，因為我哋咁多年當中猛講松果體，松果體嘅位置變咗啦，而家唔係我哋一開始講松果體嘅時候嗰個位置啦，我哋所講緊嘅小腦已經變咗啦，而家係咁多嘢變咗啊！你諗下，你用 Back to the Future 嘅概念嚇，即係 Martin McFly 改唔改到咁多嘢？改唔到啊！佢邊改到人類嘅 DNA？即係佢而家由人類掘出嚟嘅骨頭至而家咧，全部都改咗喎。係改咗新嘅骨架喎。
我哋喺上一集曼德拉效應專輯5分享到，世界之所以產生出入如曼德拉效應嘅歷史同埋現實錯亂現象，絕對係因住上一直朝住點樣得着時空穿梭嘅能力改變歷史嘅研究所引發。今集曼德拉效應專輯6將為大家更進一步分析。原來不單止聖經譯本著名運動品牌因為曼德拉效應而產生改變，甚至全人類嘅身體結構竟然都出現曼德拉效應式嘅改變。呢一種改變並非一兩件形狀改變，而係全身出現劇變，令人無法推諉。世上所有人體結構同埋解剖圖都因為曼德拉效應而變成新嘅結構，仿佛人類被神喺伊甸園創造以嚟就已經係現今嘅新結構。舊嘅結構已不復存在，亦從人類歷史上完全消失。你唔會再揾到任何有關舊結構嘅記錄，甚至人類歷史裏面所有骸骨都變成咗新嘅結構，舊結構只留喺我哋記憶之內。喺分析人體結構嘅改變之前，先與大家討論一個奇怪現象，就係對於同一件曼德拉效應事件，總會有最少2批甚至3批不同記憶嘅人存在。第一批人會清楚記得現時嘅現實與記憶唔同。以 Adidas 事件為例，雖然世人絕大部分人都記得以往 Adidas 品牌嘅串法係3個 D 字嘅 Adidas， 而唔係現今現實裏面嘅官方版本只有2個 D 嘅 Adidas， 但係發生改變嘅時間則因人而異。有啲人會記得係10多年前改變，有啲人則係上星期先發現改變咗。第二批人佔較少數，佢哋會100% 肯定從認識 Adidas 嘅第一日開始，就係2個 D 嘅 Adidas。其實第二批人並冇失憶，亦冇記錯或者講大話，只因為某啲原因令佢哋所活嘅時空與其他人唔一樣。現今絕大部分 Adidas 嘅員工，例如老闆、工人同埋設計師，肯定都屬於第二批人，認為品牌嘅名稱從未改變過。因為所有曼德拉效應都有一個獨特現象，就係任何改變都唔會影響全人類嘅生活，唔會因為一啲重大改變而令社會崩潰。例如 Adidas 嘅工作人員唔會因為突然發現品牌名稱改變而無法繼續工作，或者係設計師不知如何是好，甚至品牌創辦人亦唔會發現自己嘅品牌名稱突然被改變。對佢哋嚟講，一定唔會發現曼德拉效應嘅改變，只會從其他人口中得知。今集分析有關人體結構嘅曼德拉效應，亦會出現以上現象，最少會有2批甚至3批不同記憶嘅人。第一批人會發現現今現實嘅人體結構與佢哋以往嘅認知不同，與記憶出現分歧。呢類人通常唔係任何形式嘅專業醫護人員，網上亦有一啲長期病患者會發現身體改變咗。第二批人則通常係專業醫護人員，例如醫生或者護士，佢哋嘅記憶中由學習醫學嘅第一日開始，人體結構就與今日嘅現實一樣，從未改變過。呢個就係曼德拉效應嘅神奇現象，當中嘅改變會影響人類嘅正常生活， 你可以想象，如果所有醫生所學嘅人體結構都與現實唔同咗，豈唔係佢哋所學嘅都即時報廢，整個醫療系統都會即時崩潰嗎？例如，現今現實中，成年人嘅身體結構有206件骨塊，相信所有醫生嘅現今嘅記憶中都係呢一個數目。但係如果只係對醫學有研究，而唔係工作上嘅專業人士，可能佢哋嘅記憶中，成年人嘅結構只有188件骨塊，與現今現實嘅206塊唔同，因為佢哋並唔係專業人士，唔會斷錯症，影響病人。其實呢一啲醫護人員以前學習嘅時候，可能與其他人一樣，認知人體骨骼係188塊，但係當曼德拉效應出現之後，佢哋全部記憶同埋過去都突然改變咗，好似從開始上課學習嘅時候就已經係206塊，從未改變過。呢一啲新嘅記憶就好似與生俱來一樣。呢一啲就係曼德拉效應嘅神奇之處。雖然改變咁大，佢唔會令世界嚴重不銜接而大亂。呢一點已經證明曼德拉效應對歷史嘅改變並非時空或者平衡宇宙重疊般簡單，而係一種極超然級數嘅智慧加入人類歷史，甚至針對每個人作出個別微調嘅修正，就好似共同信息一樣，甚至係更高嘅層次。此外，亦會有第三批人，就如我哋今集節錄一位脊醫嘅現身說法。佢自小就留意同埋學習醫學，但係到咗而家進入大學學醫嘅時候，卻發現與以往所認知嘅唔同。而呢一批人就成為咗重要嘅證據，證明人類結構確實出現曼德拉效應嘅改變。而家我哋一一分析人類結構出現嘅劇變。最明顯不過嘅就係人類嘅腎臟位置。以往嘅教育同埋人體結構中，腎臟一直位於人體嘅腰部、盤骨以上嘅位置。但係現今人類腎臟嘅位置已經非常明顯地升高咗啦，改為胸腔裏面，甚至係被胸骨包裹住。因為腎臟係位於腰部，所以以往有腎石問題嘅人，最明顯就係腰部背後出現痛楚。大家都會有印象，一直以嚟從中醫嘅角度，腰同埋腎係相連嘅，因為腰同埋腎係同一個位置。但係現今嘅現實中，腎臟明顯已經升高到胸膛之內。網上已經有部分醫生同埋護士等專業人士親身指出人體結構上嘅改變，令佢哋百思不得其解。點解人類結構可以喺我哋眼前突然大幅度改變？彷彿人類被創造嘅時候，神已經改變咗人類嘅結構，與我哋本來嘅認知完全不同。以下係節錄自一位美國專業脊醫 Dr. Tan P. Lupo， 佢親身以圖文並茂嘅方式，一步步解釋人體結構上嘅改變。首先係腎臟位置嘅改變。
Stick with me as we talk about all the changes that have happened to the human body after the Mandela effect. For some new viewers that don't know, I'm actually a chiropractor, so I do some health stories from time to time. Now, I want to start off by saying, obviously, this is not an anatomy lesson. The anatomy is what it is today, and I would sound crazy to be like, no, that's not what it is. What the argument is that I have a very different memory from my childhood of what anatomy used to be compared to when I went to school and my practice. I feel like it changed sometime in the 90s because I went to school, chiropractic school I started in the late 90s. But in high school and junior high, and I think even a piece of college, I feel like they were still teaching a lot of this information. And it feels very familiar to me. This is a big problem with the Mandela effect, is that you can't really figure out an exact time. I mean, I have certain time periods I remember, but I can't always pinpoint the exact time. So I'm going to say this is probably a change that happened in the late 90s. And for some reason, we're starting to remember it now. There's a lot that's happened to the body, and you'll see I'm definitely not the first person to make these videos. In fact, I watched a couple of them to get up to speed on what they thought, and most everything I agree with. There's a couple memories I don't have. We'll talk about those, and there's some new ones I have that I don't hear anyone else talking about.
如同今集開始時提及，當出現曼德拉效應，醫生等相關專業人士嘅記憶 就會由進入醫學院開始已經出現改變，但係對於其他人，可能而家先第一次知道呢一啲改變。
Let's talk about the kidneys. This one really kind of bugs me. In the old reality, yeah, once in a while they'd be under the ribs. Part of them would go under the ribs, but not almost the entire kidney. Like, looking at these before and after pictures of realities here, this is comical how high these kidneys are in this picture. But let me give you a better picture so we can discuss this further. This is a little better representation of the kidneys. And you can see in the old reality, the right kidney is the lower one, and it would kind of hang in the rib cage a little bit. But in the new reality, practically the whole damn thing's in the rib cage. You can see the ribs right here. They're much higher up into the body. Again, very unrealistic to what I remember. It feels like the organs were crammed up into the chest. I want to talk about this a little more, so let's do that. One thing I'd like to add about the kidneys is I remember learning about Lloyd's sign. Now, as a chiropractor, when someone comes in, you have to distinguish, are they having just musculoskeletal pain, or is this low back pain from an organ? Like, could it be a kidney stone or something? And there's a quick test you can do called a kidney punch, which is also called a Lloyd's sign, where you basically send a shock wave into the lower back. You put your hand, pop it in the low back, and if that vibration hits a kidney stone or inflamed kidney, they'll come up out of their skin. It's a lot different reaction than someone with low back pain. Now, I remember watching these old videos where they were showing the training and they were punching in the mid-lumbars. They weren't punching at T12 where they do it now in the thoracic area. I wish I could find some old residual of that, so maybe some of you internet gurus can try to look up those old orthopedic tests. But I remember them being a lot lower in the back and not up into the ribs.
以上片段可見，人類腎臟嘅位置出現咗明顯嘅驚人變動，由本來嘅腰部升高至胸腔裏面。相信絕大部分人都清楚知道腎臟大約位於腰部，唔可能係胸腔。但係你嘅記憶中，以往人類嘅腎臟又係咪喺腰部，而唔係現時嘅胸腔呢？第二個最明顯嘅改變係人類嘅心臟位置。我哋一直以嚟所接受嘅教育都話俾我哋知，心臟位於人類左邊胸腔接近中央嘅位置。當你將手放喺左邊胸腔中央嘅時候，亦可以清楚感受由心臟傳嚟嘅跳動。但係原來人類嘅心臟已經由左邊胸腔明顯移動到左右胸腔中間嘅位置，所以現時當你將手放喺左邊胸腔，已經無法好似以往般清楚感受到心跳。大家要知道，呢一種人體結構嘅改變並非所謂進化或者環境改變而產生，因為曼德拉效應嘅改變係指人類心臟嘅位置由人類始祖亞當同夏娃已經開始改變。心臟位置係自全人類有歷史以嚟都改變咗，不單圖片上嘅改變，而係實質位置嘅改變。舊有嘅心臟位置只留喺人類嘅記憶裏面。
Let's now talk about the heart. In the old reality, I remember the heart being much more left than it is now. You can see how it's left and almost on its side in the old reality. And in the new reality, it hangs down. It's a little bit left, sure, but not like this one. I want to talk about this more. I'm going to expand on the heart position. Now, I'm going to offer you guys this and see if this resonates with you. If you went to government school, you learned the Pledge of Allegiance, and you always put your hand where? Left side, right? Cover your heart. You don't put it in the center. So why is that there? What is that about? Kind of doesn't make sense. We'd be doing it here. That's not what we do. We do it here. The other thing that really strikes me is all the fiction and stories out there that revolve around the heart being on the left side. I remember certain vampire movies where they stab the vampire, but it's on the wrong side. They don't kill him. They stab him in the center. They don't get him in the left side of the heart. They have to, the vampire stays alive and attacks the people and kills them, or somebody will get shot. And the doctor will say, well, you're lucky you got hit on the right, because if you got hit on the left, it would have killed you, gone through your heart. There's all these references to the heart being on the left. In this reality, yes, of course, the heart is a little on the left. But I'm talking about in the old reality, it was a lot further over on the left.
冇錯，就如呢一位脊醫所述，人類嘅心臟位置已經出現咗巨大變動，由左邊移向咗中間。但係你嘅記憶中，以往人類心臟係咪偏向左邊呢？第三個最明顯嘅人體改變就係人嘅頭骨，無論係頭蓋骨或者係牙較骨嘅形狀，都與我哋以往嘅認知完全唔同。最明顯嘅就係頭骨嘅眼眶位置，以往眼眶內係一個空洞，並冇骨塊保護後面嘅腦部。而家人類嘅頭骨已經突然改變，出現咗一塊稱為蝶骨嘅骨塊保護腦部。就如今集開始時所講，喺舊記憶中，成年人嘅總骨塊數目係188塊，但係現今所有醫學資料都顯示，人類有歷史以嚟一直都係206塊骨，即係比舊記憶多咗18塊。而眼睛後面嘅兩塊蝶骨就係其中最明顯嘅兩塊。
The first place we're going to start is the skull. So let's start by diving into the skull. That's a good joke. All right, let's take a look here. This old reality skull this is what I remember. Now, I'm sure people will say, well, it's just an old anatomy book and maybe things have changed since then. Yeah, but this is what I remember, and a lot of other people remember. So this is what I'm going to put up is the best picture I could find. Now, my girlfriend actually pointed this out when we started, is how different the skull shapes are. You notice in the old reality, the skull looks like a normal head. It's human, it's round. And then you look at this one, in the new reality, it's all oblong, especially in the back here. It looks more like an alien head than a human. Look at this thing. So that was kind of the first, okay, something's different. Also, what we noticed is the jawbone. My girlfriend's a dental hygienist, and she kept saying, look at the jaw. And she's right, because the jaw looks very different. The new reality, the jaw has a much thicker ramus of the mandible here. And also it kind of articulates different too. One of the big things I am seeing talked about in the forums is this indentation in the temporal region. You don't really see it much here, but it's, it's where the masticating muscles attach. Now, people were saying they have no memory of this kind of indentation, and that the zygomatic arch, as well as the temporal process, these are much more prominent now. And I'd have to agree with that. The other issue is the styloid bone, which we're going to get to in the next slide here, but you can kind of get an idea that this right here, the styloid bone is much bigger than the old one. Like, it looks like it doubled in size. And I remember that one thing as a chiropractor, when you feel this area and you're feeling for the atlas transverse process, it's really easy to mix it up with the styloid process. And you can see that in the new reality, why that would be. It's practically sitting on top of the transverse process of the atlas bone. Another big one, which you've probably already heard this, but I'm going to put it out there in case you haven't, is the eye sockets have changed a lot. In the old reality, they were much more open. Some people were saying there's absolutely no bone at all in them. I kind of remember there's being some bone on the edge, but the very back being a large open hole where the optic nerves came out. And you can kind of get an idea compared to the new ones where it's just like a little slit where the optic nerves run out, and this whole area is protecting you with bone. And I remember that people would die a lot easier if they got eye injuries because it would affect their brain directly, where here they have some sort of protection with bone. I really don't remember that. I think that's a big change that's got some people freaked out. And you'll see a lot of this still in old TV shows and movies. Now, a lot of those are models, so they're kind of what they think the skeleton is, but the old black and white movies used real bones, and you'll see that there are big black gaping holes where the eye sockets used to be in the old black and white movies. They're still out there, the residual. Let's take another look at the skull a little deeper. Now, just kind of ignore the writing around the pictures, because some of these pictures I had to flip and move around so you can see a good side-by-side. But what I can tell you is the parietal and the occipital bones are different. So this is the old reality, and this is the new reality. And you'll see that the suture is very different. The occiput here, occipital bone, goes all the way around, where here it kind of stops at the mastoid process. It's like a cap on the back. And again, the head is round and looks like a normal human, and here it looks like some sort of alien. Look at that. It's all weird. Again, this is a good view of the styloid process. In the new reality, it's super long. It almost, in this picture, it looks like it's touching the mandible. It doesn't, but it looks like it. And here it's so much shorter. So you can really notice a big difference on that one. I learned anatomy all through my childhood. I was always interested in it, all the way through high school and all the way into college. I took a lot of anatomy in college. And then years later, I get into chiropractic school, and part of me goes, you know, maybe I learned something different. They're showing me different things, but I never really thought much about it because, you know, this is a doctoral program, so surely they're right. And that was it. There was never really a big disconnect in my mind about things.
以上片段可見頭骨眼腔內嘅明顯改變，相信大部分人嘅記憶裏面並冇現時嘅現實裏面突然出現嘅蝶骨。但係你嘅記憶又係咪一樣呢？你嘅記憶中眼腔內係咪有蝶骨呢？另外 ，YouTube 亦有人發現一本89年前，即1928年出版嘅醫學解剖圖書，當中以人手繪製嘅頭骨結構圖，與我哋上述嘅舊記憶，即未出現曼德拉效應時一樣，但係卻與現今現實嘅頭骨唔同。當中記載嘅頭骨比較遠，眼腔裡面亦冇蝶骨，正如 Dr. Tang P. Lupo 所講嘅一樣。
Hello, I have with me a 90-year-old book, Library of Health, copyrighted in 1927. I have noticed that this book has some beautiful illustrations of what our skull and anatomy and things used to be like. Now I noticed that this book, this is a 1928 edition, so this is 89 years old. Written by, anyway, that guy. Historical Publishing Company. I want to share with you these beautiful illustrations from, 89 years ago, like this, and we're going to go through and end up at the skull. But I wanted to share because look at this beautiful skull and shape of a head and compare it to today. It doesn't look like the same guy. Here we go. Let's delve into his brain. I want to go nice and calm and slow so you can see it all. Here's the back side of the page. Muscles of the face and neck. Cerebrum or brain. There's the eye sockets. Look at the bone structure. That doesn't look like that little slit that we have now. The bridge of the nose looks a little out, but otherwise there's no ridge on the jaw. Notice how smooth the skull is. And now let's go in internal view of the base of the cranium. Middle lobe of the brain. So this is like slicing in half what you would see. And view of the base of the brain showing the origin of the nerves of special senses and blood supply of the brain. I'm holding it still so you can screenshot these if you would like to look further at these. Here's the real beauty, the skull. As soon as I heard that we had Klingon ridges, I needed to run to this book immediately and take a picture, and it stayed the same from what I can recall. This is just paper, like, and glue stuck to it, so this isn't a ridge. That's just paper, but you can see very smooth. Look at the jawline. There's no strange ridge. Look how flat the ridge is. There's no holes. I don't know what that is right there, but there's no holes right here. Where are they? I forgot. Somewhere around here and right here, but there are no holes in here. And look at how smooth everything is. And this is just a drawing, but maybe that's why I still have this evidence today.
第四個改變係上半身嘅骨架，例如我哋常稱為鎖骨嘅外形及胸骨嘅外形同埋大小都已經完全改變，與我哋過去嘅認知唔同。
Let's talk about the rest of the skeleton, because there's some big changes, and there's a couple, like I said, I found that I don't hear anyone else talking about, so let's get to that. Now I'd like to talk about the upper torso. This is a rendering that's floating around the internet of kind of what people remember as the old reality skeleton versus the new reality. And this is what my memory was from my childhood. Now, I remember skulls looking a lot more like this than like this. That being said, there was a big difference in the shoulders. The shoulder was just kind of like one big plate. Yeah, you had collarbones and stuff, but it didn't have all the articulations and the processes the new shoulder blades have. They seem smaller. I'm going to keep referring to this because it seems to me like this is almost more monkey-like. If you look at chimp spines and stuff, you're going to see that we kind of have more monkey stuff going on in the old spine. Now, one thing that I don't remember that's kind of inaccurate here is there was a manubrium and a sternum right here down to about the second or third rib, and then a lot of this was just a cartilage plate. Where in the new rib cage, this sternum goes down way further than I remember. So that kind of, I'm gonna have to look at that anatomy up there because I don't remember it going that far. With the old reality, the ribcage was a lot bigger, and all that was in here was the lungs. Like, we had larger lungs, and the diaphragm, and maybe a little bit of the liver was in there, but pretty much everything was under the diaphragm, and it was all lung in here, where the new one feels like they push the organs up into the ribcage more. There's like kidneys in there, and liver, and spleens, and yeah, there was a little bit, but now like almost the whole organ's in there. It's very different. Another big thing people are talking about is the floating ribs. Now, I kind of remember ribs like this, where they came around and they really didn't attach to much in the front. They were actual floating ribs. Once in a while, they would say that, you know, it would grow into the cartilage depending on the person. But when I went and got my training as a doctor, this is what we learned. And this is what I remember because, you know, one of the things about chiropractic is you want to be careful adjusting this area because it can be really uncomfortable to a patient to adjust the floating ribs. So at some point this changed, but I definitely remember this old reality. And maybe if you've looked at it now that this might start resonating with you. Something else I forgot to mention is a lot of people are discussing this area here. Some people say that we had another bone coming off here, like a cervical rib, a long one that used to connect to the shoulder blades. And here you'll see the appearance of the first ribs coming through under the collarbone. And this is kind of what I remember when I got trained and what it is now. Now this shot's not the greatest example, but it's pretty much the best thing I could find out there. And the old reality, the collarbones used to tilt down more. Now this effect is obviously because, you know, the skeleton's looking forward, but this is give you a good idea what I meant. That it was bent a lot more, where in the new reality it's straighter.
第五個改變係人體下半身盤骨嘅位置，外形出現咗明顯嘅變動。
The next part of this, we're going to explore the lower body. Now, before I forget, and I'm not really showing a picture of it, some people said that we only had a tibia bone on the leg. I don't have any memory of that, so I'm not including it, but some people think the fibula never existed. That being said, let's get into the rest of this. The lower back and the pelvis look a little different. Now, in the old reality, they didn't have the big, strong transverse processes sticking out. But what really screwed me up, and I remember this really well, is the sacrum was a lot skinnier and looked a lot more like a monkey's. It wasn't this big, thick triangle. And this bothered me a lot, so much that in a minute I'm going to stop this and go into this much deeper. But let me finish this thought out. I keep coming back saying we look more monkey-like. If you look at the humerus and the wrist, here they're almost the same size, just like a monkey. Usually monkeys actually have a longer wrist bones, where the new reality, our humerus is longer. Also, our hips were more kind of like a monkey, where the acetabulum and especially the hip bone going in right here are more at an angle, more flat. They're more horizontal than if you look at the new reality, how they're much more angled. So let me go talk about the sacrum, because that is really bugging me. I spend a good time of my practice also working on low backs and tailbone pain, so I know my sacrums really well. This is how I remember the old sacrum looking. It was much more like a chimp. And in fact, this picture you're looking at is a chimp bone, because I can't seem to find any picture from the old reality that still looks like this. But this is what my memory looks like. It was much thinner than this big, bulky, triangle-looking sacrum. Now, I'm going to tell you a story in a minute that helps accentuate this. I want to expand a little on that sacrum section. This is your sacrum, this tailbone thing, and I know my skeleton's in pretty bad shape. It's about 20 years old. But as I was saying before, there were some changes, like the obturator foramen. Some people are saying they were missing. I don't remember that. I always remember these holes being here. But what I do notice is the ischial tuberosities seem a lot thicker. This is where you sit on, by the way. Your tail. Some people call it your butt bone or your tailbone or whatever, but that's really your tailbone. But anyway, ischial tuberosities seem bigger. But like I was talking about, and I showed that picture where the sacrum was much thinner. It wasn't this big hawking triangle. Well, the reason I remembered that is I went sledding in high school and jammed my tailbone so bad that I broke some of it. And what happened is I went and got an x-ray. And the doctor's showing me the x-ray on film. And we're laughing because it looks like I have a monkey's tail. You know, there's like, it was much thinner. It wasn't this big, thick sacrum like the pictures I have now. And I remember him telling me, oh, that's normal. Everybody has the monkey's tail. Don't worry about it. And that's kind of my memory of, yeah, you know, the sacrum used to look a lot skinnier and be more segmented. And that's really bothering me. You know how like the Mandela effect, something, you'll hear like 20 things and then one thing runs by that really bugs you, and the sacrum one really bugs me.
呢一位脊醫喺網上揾到一啲舊電影片段，可以見到人體骨架嘅舊模型，明顯與現今現實嘅人體骨架外形唔同。
The best examples I can find of the old skeleton is the old Vincent Price movie, House on the Haunted Hill. I'm going to link a clip, so you're going to see this little eye icon appear to the top right corner if you want to actually watch the clip. But you can get a better idea of what the skeleton looked like here, that they had a much bigger rib cage. There's the bent collarbones I'm talking about. And you noticed how long the wrists are compared to the humerus. And you can sort of see the tailbone, the skinnier tailbone. It's so hard to tell on this. I can't tell completely, but you can definitely see the larger scapulas that are flat. Now, I am not positive if this is a real skeleton or not. Most likely it was a reproduction, but even if it was a reproduction, why did they make it like that? So I'm going to link the clip so you can watch this yourself.
另外，呢一位脊醫亦發現人類腦部嘅構造與佢以往嘅理解有出入，例如小腦嘅外形同埋位置。
Now let's dive into the brain. Now the brain seems to have changed too. Most notably is the cerebellum here. In the old reality, this pretty much went down into C1. It got really close, and some people, they would even say there was a big argument if that part of the brainstem went into C1 and 2 or not. This new reality, the cerebellum seems up and tucked back. It's a different shape, and it seems kind of like crammed and pushed back. That's not the memory I have of it. It's almost like there's less frontal lobe and more brainstem area. You know, they put more room in the back. It's almost like more reptile brain and less, you know, thinking brain.
其實所有內臟，包括胃、大腸、小腸同埋肝臟，位置同埋大小都已經完全改變。其中肝臟更比我哋以往嘅認知大咗好多。
As we get into the organs, let's start here with the stomach. Now the esophagus just kind of empties straight down into the stomach. It turns a little bit in the old reality. And I wish I had a better picture for the old reality. I can't really find one, but this will give you a good idea that the stomach seems much more horizontal and on its side. And then it comes out and you go through, like the duodenum wraps around the pancreas, and then it just goes right into the small intestines. In the new reality, you have an esophagus, and a lot of these pictures are showing this to make like a hard right angle. And then the stomach's much more vertical. It's not so horizontal. And then it spins around and it goes all the way around the pancreas. So I want to talk about that more. It seems like I was talking about that the organs got crammed a lot more in under the rib cage. This liver is now gigantic, and it looks like it pushed the stomach up to the left. Also, there seems to be less intestine as I remember. I seem to remember a lot more. Now, the food would have come out the stomach and started here in the small intestine and gone around the head of the pancreas, but then it would just turn down and go into the rest of the small intestines. In this reality, it turns all the way around and then does a U-turn right here. I mean, kind of terrible design is this, where everything here, you're just asking for stuff to get stuck, it feels like. But I don't have memory of this in the past. I remember it just going right into to the small intestines and not going, all the way left and then back to the right.
從以上專業脊醫嘅分析，我哋可以看見曼德拉效應絕對係千真萬確，並非部分人集體因為無知而記錯事件，而係我哋現今嘅現實已經因為某啲可怕嘅原因而被改變，同以往唔同咗啦。當你喺 Google 或者 YouTube 搜尋 Mandela Effect Body Changes， 就會發現呢一個係非常熱門嘅話題，包括醫護人員在內，好多人都一同見證曼德拉效應對人體結構嘅改變。你能夠想像，如果連人類嘅身體結構都出現呢一種改變，甚至唔係某一日突然被改變，而係由人類被造，即神創造人類嘅第一刻開始，就已經與我哋一直以嚟嘅認知截然不同。呢一種改變甚至完全超越所謂藉時光機回到過去改變歷史嘅程度，而係將神嘅創造改變嘅程度。但係人類嘅身體結構由神創造開始，不單從未改變過，甚至未曾進化過。究竟係乜嘢力量能夠改變神創造人類嘅設計呢？現時我哋見到神所設立嘅一啲慣例，例如神創造人類嘅慣例，都已經因為曼德拉效應而改變咗。其實曼德拉效應比你想象中龐大上億萬倍。然而，約翰牧師會為大家一步步打開呢一個創世以嚟嘅最大謎團，係一個比所有共同信息、千古之謎加起嚟仲要重大嘅謎題。